Welcome to The Corner, La Source's digital show dedicated to the sport and entertainment industry. Every 2 weeks, we invite a professional to share their experience, background, and challenges. The sport industry moves fast, and having their insights is the best way to keep up to speed. Welcome to The Corner.
One week away from the 2023 Jakarta pre-opening, Formula E has never done so well. In this context, we received Harry Browne, Strategy Director of the championship, to unveil the crazy decade since its inaugural season in 2014. From a small startup to a huge sports organization, Formula E has managed to build a solid business and expansion model, and you are going to know how in this new Le Corner episode. Welcome, Harry.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I know the weeks are busy for you these days, so thanks a lot for taking an hour to speak with us and hopefully make a very interesting recording for our audience.
Yeah, hopefully. No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Terrific. First things first. Can you give our auditors a quick introduction of yourself, your role? Would love to know more about Harry.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm strategy director at Formula E. I'm a Londoner, so I'm now working just up the road from where I went to school. So my path hasn't taken me too far. But prior to that, after leaving university, I worked in strategy consulting for about 5 years at a couple of different firms, latterly Altman Solon, which is one of the biggest TMT-focused consulting firms out there. And after about 5 years of that, I decided that I wanted to do something that I think aligned a bit more closely to what I was interested in and my passions. And so those really are sports and music in my life. So it's very lucky that when I was looking around then, the job at Formula E came up, and that's where I've been for the last 5.5 years at this point.
Nice. Were you sports mechanic fans, or what's your background with sports?
Playing as a youngster and big fan of kind of football, cricket, rugby, and whatever's on the TV, really. And then Formula One used to be, I would say I was a bit of a lapsed Formula One fan from my youth. And then have obviously got much more back into the motorsports world since I joined Formula E and become a big Formula E fan as well. And then latterly with the rise of F1, it's impossible not to talk to your friends about F1 at the moment as well. So yeah, fully back into that world now, I'd say.
Yeah. Between the fact that the competition is now great again, and that just their content strategy and digital strategy and their rights strategy is just incredibly interesting. But so is Formula E's, and we'll get down to that in a few minutes. But tell us a little bit more about your journey going from the sports services side to the between startup and sports league. It's a bit of a mix. Tell us a bit about that journey, what you like on one side, what you like on the other, and what led you to actually join Formula E on a very exciting project, yet it was very new when you joined them.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of things that consulting has to offer young kind of people starting out in their career, I think. And for me, it was a great way to learn a lot of business skills, to really learn all of these in quite a high pressure environment and travel around the world, working on interesting projects, getting to familiarize yourself with some of the big questions that some big telcos and investment funds are trying to answer. And I think it's a great learning environment for that reason. What it wasn't offering me was the chance to engage with questions and industries that really excited me, or at least not all of the time. So that was really what was driving the decision behind trying to find something that would excite me a bit more. And I've been incredibly lucky that when I've joined Formula E, a lot of the questions that I'm trying to answer in my role are the types of things that I would happily go to the pub with my friends and debate over a beer, and conversations I'd like to have in that forum. So it's really, I think, a pretty privileged position to be in, where you find the job and the content of what you do so interesting that it's the type of thing that you're happy to bore your friends about.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's all that interesting and glamorous, but as a rule of thumb, I think that's been an amazing place to be and to be on that journey.
Yeah, what you're telling us right now is that your job was preparing yourselves for the debates and capturing data for when you went to the pub with your friends and you would just beat them because your whole work was about understanding what was going on and pull the right numbers and the right debates. That's a fun one. And just like moving over to that. So yeah, you were missing a bit of a, I guess, daily excitement, which is what you were looking to find with Formula E.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's Formula E has changed a huge amount as well since I've been there. So I joined in season 4. We're now in season 9. So as I said, I've been here about 5.5 years. And when I joined, there were around about 60 or 70 employees. And now we're 3 times that. So we're over 200 today. And that has meant that the company in many ways is unrecognizable from being what really did feel like a startup and a lot of very entrepreneurial and really driven people who really delivered in their area and were really focused and really strong at that, to being now a company that feels a lot more grown up in many ways. It has a lot more subject matter experts, I would say, used to working in established sports and also challenger brands, but bringing a lot of experience from elsewhere and used to working in a way that feels a bit more collaborative and a bit more an emphasis on planning rather than delivering and making stuff happen and matching it up out of nowhere, which people, we're incredible at doing and extremely inspirational for doing so as well. But as I said, there's been a bit of a change in emphasis. And it's also changed what the role of strategy has been. Because when I first started, I was the first and only dedicated strategy employee. And so I would have to think about questions on my own and trying to come up with approaches and feed that back to the organization. Whereas now we have so many different leaders who all have strategic thinking across the departments that my role is that it's actually the projects are much more commonly done in partnership with people from various other teams. And it's more about leveraging the expertise that we have across the organization and figuring out how we can work together to create the most impact as a company, rather than necessarily kind of sitting in a silo and strategy and trying to answer questions in isolation.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one in terms of the growth of the startup cycles overall, like who's a right fit for an organization at what time of the growth and how you readapt with time and facing the challenges of massively hiring in a short amount of time. We were discussing it right before this session. So it's an interesting one. And I'm assuming every year feels big, right? As an organization that's still pretty early stage and you've faced so many things, launching the competition and then COVID and then back to relaunching. And this year, 2 major things, launching in new territories, and it's going to be the first year of your Gen 3 cars, right? Tell us a bit more about that. What's a Gen 3 car, which territories, and why strategically addressing those markets?
Yeah, so since I started Formula E, this is without question the most that's changed in any off-season. As you mentioned this, we have the new car, and this is our cars at the moment run on 4-year cycles, technology cycles. We introduced a new car this year that we really set out with the intention, alongside the FIA, to have the ambition that it would be better in the previous car in every single dimension. So we wanted it lighter, and it's about 60 kilograms lighter than the previous car. We wanted it quicker, and the top speed of this one is now 200 miles an hour.
Quick question, 60 kilos, how heavy is a car?
It's now 860, I believe.
Okay.
Give or take.
Trick you, but more or less, yeah. Between 800 and 900 kilos. Okay.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Capable now of 200 miles an hour. We wanted it more powerful, and the peak energy output or power output is now 350 kilowatts. It was 250 kilowatts. We removed the front brakes, so all of that energy goes straight back through regen, straight back into the battery. Now the car generates 40% of all of the energy it uses during the race, which is unbelievable. We wanted it to be capable of fast charging, which it now is, and that obviously has implications on the rules and how that's implemented in a way that makes sense for the sporting product. And we also, with everything with Formula E, we wanted to do it in the most sustainable way possible. And we say this is the most sustainable electric car ever created. So all of that was going on with the car. That's one piece of it. We had 3 new teams joining. Maserati, who our first Italian manufacturer, so that was huge for us. McLaren, who really need no introduction with their motorsport heritage. And also we had Abt Cupra join as well. And Abt have been part of Formula E for a while, bringing Cupra as a new manufacturer as well. So then we had new teams. And then, as you mentioned as well, we had new races. So Hyderabad in India was an amazing success. And that was our first race in India. And it's amazing to be able to bring Tier 1 motorsport back into India for the first time in a while. We went to Cape Town for the first time, which was, again, an unbelievable event. Cities that get much more iconic than Cape Town. It's amazing to be able to race around the stadium there. Sao Paulo in Brazil is obviously a huge motorsports market. And I know that since before I joined, we've been trying as Formula E to get a race in Brazil, and we've come close a couple of times. And it was really the culmination of years of hard work to get that done. And then later in the season, we're racing in Portland. And then attached to all of that as well, this year we refreshed the brand and relaunched that with a new logo and visual and audio system as well around that. So really, it was a huge amount going on. And the main challenge was really to make sure that we knew we had so many steps being taken forward in so many parts of the business, but to make sure that we were delivering on that as a full package that felt joined up and maximized each of the individual elements was really crucial. And it meant that when we went to Mexico for the start of the season for the first race, there was a lot of nervousness, if I'm honest. There was a lot of concern that, any one of these parts might fall down and bring the rest of it down with it. But actually, the moment the cars went out on the track and we had a sellout crowd with 40,000 fans in there, everyone saw what it was capable of and everything worked. And it was a big relief and everyone really calmed down, I think.
Yeah, interesting. And just the fact that you're able to implement in those territories says a lot about the global interest, right? But because going to South America, to the US, to Africa, and to Asia, and in territories that are so strategic for any sports organization says a lot on the success so far. And so it's very clear. I mean, 3 core elements, right? You have to have fandom, right? You have to have people that are willing to spend some time like the content and spend some money also around a competition. So that has been achieved. Technical performance is obviously one of the key elements of Formula E. Show what renewable energy and more green energy can do in terms of performance, and just the overall green aspect of the competition from a marketing standpoint are very crucial. What are the other key elements of the vision behind Formula E, and where are you at with that whole strategy?
Yeah, so taking it right back to when we started, our founder Alejandro Agag, who's well known in the motorsports industry, he said that Formula E could have been founded by one of 2 people. It could have been founded by an environmentalist, or it could have been founded by a motorsports guy, as he puts it. And he's a real motorsports guy, but what he saw is this real opportunity in the industry with the growth of EVs coming, and now 9 years on, we're right in the middle of it. He saw a real opportunity to be the first to launch an electric series and capitalize on all of these macro trends that we're going to be supporting it into the next few decades, most likely. And the vision from the start was really always to demonstrate that sustainability can live alongside high performance and fun, and you don't necessarily need to make large sacrifices in order to live more sustainably and to make sustainable choices. And actually, that was really at Formula E's core to bring those 2 things together. Now our mission, I think, is broadened out to be, now we understand that there's more that we can do than just accelerate adoption of EVs. We really want to accelerate sustainable human progress. But that core combination of the racing and the reason of performance and sustainability, that's really still at the core of everything we do at Formula E.
Got it. Got it. And starting to dive into the whole business element of things. So we understand you were just mentioning that there were 40,000 people in Mexico. So that is that about an average of the attendance at each of your events, or was the average attendance?
So it depends a lot on the venue. Mexico is an awesome place for us because it has is right in the middle of the city, which is really crucial part of our USP and our brand promise, if you like. But it's also there are a lot of grandstands there that we can use and fit. In Berlin, we build everything on the disused airport at the Tempelhof Airport, and it means that the scale of what we can build there is just slightly more constrained. And so we can't actually fit 40,000 people in each place we go. In Berlin, we raced on the Saturday and Sunday, and we had 34,000 fans over the weekend. So yeah, just under 20,000 per day. And we find that, depending on the venue, we end up somewhere between 20 and 40,000 fans, Mexico being our biggest race.
Got it. And if we move over to the, not in presence, but to the media aspect of things and to the media rights side of things, how is it organized internally, and what are your major sources of revenue between D2C, between selling the different rights, between just grabbing overall reach on certain free channels? Can you help us understand a little bit how Formula E exists throughout the world in terms of its media rights?
Yeah, so we have 40, I think, broadcast partners broadcasting us in around 150 countries around the world. So we have a large, impressive footprint. The strategy at the moment is very much, it'll be pretty obvious to everyone listening, but it's really all about the growth of the business, the growth of the fan base, the growth of the audience. So rather than looking for the biggest check in media at the moment, really what we're trying to do is to find broadcast partners who really believe in the long-term potential of Formula E, will put us on their core channels to expose us to as large an audience as we can. And that's obviously really vital for us to build a fan base, but it's also really vital for us to support our teams and manufacturers who invest in participating in Formula E, and our sponsors as well, who are obviously paid to make sure that their association with Formula E is shown to as many people as possible, and the storytelling around that. In terms of where the audience comes from, much of the audience is as you'd expect in core motorsports markets: UK, Germany, France, Italy, US, China as well, increasingly. But then also what we find is when we go racing in the likes of Indonesia or Brazil or even Cape Town for the first time this year as well, we find that we can create really great broadcast relationships off the back of those pinnacle races, which means and bring a lot of audience to all of the races across the season off the back of those broadcast relationships that we've built. So last year when we went to Jakarta for the first time, we found that Indonesia became one of our biggest broadcast markets in terms of audience, really as a result of the fact the fans really bought into the product that was bringing tier one racing to their country for the first time on four wheels. They have a big motorcycling heritage there as well. And that meant that off the back of the strength of that broadcast relationship, we were able to really grow our fan base in Indonesia, and that was a great success story. So it's a bit of a combination of those core markets where you'd see it traditionally, and then growth markets where we are starting to make a bigger splash as well.
Got it. And just overall, in terms of the percentage of the media rights piece in the whole overall finances of Formula E, like what percentage does it represent in the overall Formula E organization?
It's a single-digit percentage at the moment. Our main revenue streams I mentioned are absolutely sponsorship, and then we also take another significant revenue stream is from governments and local promoters who will work with us to take the racing to their country as well, and so that's the kind of second biggest category.
Okay, interesting, and it shows that the organization is healthy because it's not dependent on media rights. Obviously, there are other investments coming from different places, but I'm assuming there's still a challenge to grow that revenue on the media rights side of things.
Absolutely, and if you look at any tier one sport, and that's our ambition to become a tier one sport, a big part of the pie is always coming from from media rights, and we know that's where we want to get to.
Yeah.
What are the factors in whether you can get a large check from a media company? You need to have that fan base that's willing to watch, to fund the ad model, or to subscribe to watch, to get the subscription revenue. And our priority is really to make sure that we have a fan base that's big enough that we can start to dictate those kinds of fees. At the moment, as I say, the strategy is all about growing that fan base, and for that we want to work with broadcast partners who will give us great production, promote us, and put our product in a really prominent place on their platforms. Used a lot of P's there for some reason, but maybe that'll help.
Yep. And so interesting piece, and because the words, the strategy, obviously something that's very important and very key to your own personal role. What does your day-to-day look like in terms of how do you manage to deploy a strategy in the short term? How do you manage to deploy the strategy in the long term? What does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, it's heavily variable, which means I'm about to give a long answer. There's, I would say, about half of the work is really thinking about traditional strategy topics. So, which should our core markets be for growth? And at the moment, been working a lot on our longer term calendar strategy, meaning which races should we be adding in and when, in which markets. If we ever think about doing any M&A, or if we're looking at supporting the board of shareholders with any topics that they think we need to be focusing on, that those are the types of more traditional strategy projects that I spend about half of my time on. The other half is, we're still a small company growing a lot, so I actually I'm involved with making sure that the company is running in an efficient way, and that all of the various teams and departments are all pulling in the same direction. And so that, making sure that there's information flows within the company are operating as they should, and everyone's talking together. That's a big part of the role as well. And then there's also a part of it as well, which is more about building new stuff. And so a couple of years ago, we didn't really have an esports or sim racing platform. So I spent a lot of time working with the gaming team on that. More recently, we've put together a B2B conference, which helps to position Formula E as a thought leader, and gives our teams and partners a platform to talk about their involvement in Formula E to a different audience. And so I'll be more involved in creating that and building up a proof of concept or a pilot event. And then if it's something that the organization sees value in going forwards, then we'll start to staff that up in a way that means that me and my team will be able to take a step back and focus on the next thing.
Is it fair to say that so it's strategy, but somehow it is innovation as well, right? In terms of, or at least that the whole process thing is one thing that's fundamental in every high speed growing organization. That's really interesting, but you can go as wide as, esport and B2B conference organization. It feels like anything that you guys are trialing also falls under your hood.
Yeah, exactly. There are countless projects that are being run across the business by people that aren't me as well. So I don't want to take credit for all of it. There's it's a great role to be able to get involved in a lot of really variable topics and get a lot of experience in different parts of the business, which is really fantastic.
Yeah. And from your position, where do you see the biggest potential for growth still for Formula E? In terms of, there's the extension of the market, there's growing the revenues, that makes a lot of sense. But conceptually, where should the focus go towards as far as Formula E? Data, acquisition of first-party data. What are your sponsors looking for that are financing most of your model? What are the key areas that you're looking to grow the organization?
We have a great business intelligence team that gives us a lot of data, and part of the sell for Formula E, and part of the reason that I think everyone should be bullish on its prospects, is that there are so many people at the moment out there in the world who describe themselves or as motorsports fans, or have some interest in motorsports, have what we call a progressive mindset, in the sense that they're probably early tech adopters, or they care about sustainability and social sustainability, who either don't know about Formula E yet or have never engaged with the Formula E product yet. And what we find is when we actually are able to reach these people, or we're able to put our product in front of them, that they're really sticky, and they're very quick to engage from becoming aware to having some kind of engagement to becoming fans. And so, to answer your question really directly, the role is to continue to have an amazing product such that when we are able to reach these people and put them into the top of the funnel, they continue to be really sticky and they become fans that, we will then, as you say, we can start to get first party data. We can start to monetize them in various ways, either directly or through our sponsors. So, that's the sell. And we know that the job is really just beginning. There's so many people still for us to reach and convert. So that's, what the challenge is. And it's also what's so exciting about it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of motor fans that you actually haven't reached to date that you still have in your target. That's an interesting one. And overall, it to open it up to a wider topic of the industry, right? There's a lot of conversations right now between selling your rights or going D2C, right? One of the big ones, there's a big conversation right now around the Premier League and a platform and what could that entail, and comparing it to the American model with the NFL League Pass and the NBA League Pass. Sounds like that data is going to be at the forefront of your strategy, that the organizations that are sponsoring you must have some interest in knowing their audiences, because it's very key for the future of that segment of the industry, I would say, in terms of green and renewable energies and the involvement of everybody in that process. What is your opinion on that? And what are the mechanisms that you're putting in place to capture first party data? I don't want to talk quite yet about the whole fan participation element that we'll get back to, but tell us more about what you guys are doing in order to actually know those users better. You're saying that your product is sticky, but how do you measure it as well?
Yeah, so one thing I didn't touch on, another thing that changed over the off season is we completely revamped and relaunched our website and our app as well. So we went from, it's moved on massively over the off season, and what we now have the capability to have logins, to make sure that we're able to properly track our fans that come to our site, and that we're early in the, you compared us, you raised some other kind of US sports leagues there that are a long way ahead of us, and there's no question. And so we really need to make sure that we're moving very quickly to start to have a digital product that matches our ambitions, and that's we've got a lot closer to that over the off season. We're looking at doing things like gated content for people that log in and subscribers. At the moment, we don't have that. We have a digital engagement product on our app that's the predictor that we relaunched for this year, that you have to have a login for, so that you can play prediction elements, and we'll bring people back to the app by giving them push notifications to ask them to make a prediction, which in turn works as a tune-in product or tune-in prompt, because people understand that qualifying session's on, the race session is on. So we're doing a lot of things like that. As I say, we're early on our journey there, and there'll be a lot more to come in the digital product roadmap for us over the next year. And the team are working hard on that. But it's definitely come a long way, even in the last 12 months for us, in terms of the quality and the depth of the digital offering that we can have on our own platforms to bring fans in, and as you say, to start to understand more about them. On the broadcast side, we look at the number of the cumulative audience, so that's the key thing for us. What we're also starting to really focus on more and more is the quality of that audience, and how what proportion of them we're engaging from a 1 minute view to a 3 minute view, or what's the overall view duration that your average viewer has of the product. And that for the broadcast team is one of their most important KPIs, because they really want to make sure and understand that the fans that are coming across our product are sticking around because they're excited by what they see, and they want to continue watching. And that's really the marker they use to understand how well the TV product is landing with the fans.
Gotcha. And it's interesting because opening up the session, we're discussing of the multiple periods that you've gone through at Formula E, with the various differences in approaches and the various stages of the organization, moving from a small lean startup to starting to be a big sports organization. Were those perspectives very different 5 years ago than they are now? If we had to ask you 5 years ago, what would your work look like? What would your job look like? And what would your key strategic topics look like? Would they have gone in this direction, you think? Would you have predicted that you would be doing what you're doing now?
That's an interesting question. I think probably the biggest mindset shift, and it's changed a lot of my work as well, is that there is increasingly a real understanding that there's no shortcut to becoming, a huge overnight success. It happens very rarely. And the way that you build a fan base is actually by having a great TV product, so that people, or not necessarily TV, but a great content product, so that when people are watching the crown jewels that you have, which for us is the race, they'd love it and they want to watch it again. That's one thing. And if they come to the event, which is already a subset of people who will be engaging with the product, they have an amazing time. They want to come back and they want to tell everyone about it. Those, are really our key touch points, and there's no substitute for getting those spot on. Really nailing it so that these people that engage can be your biggest advocates. That is not to say that there isn't value in creating one-off peaks or bursts in awareness and creating fame by doing something newsworthy. And we actually just launched a brand film for season 9 that I encourage everyone to go watch. It's really striking, really amazing. We drop a Gen 3 car out of a plane, and it looks amazing. It really, really cinematic, high value. The idea behind that is to really get people talking and to create some kind of virality so that people start to be aware of Formula E and want to find out more. These things are great, and we have a campaign that will continue to leverage that over the course of the season. But if you're getting people through the door, there's no substitute for having an amazing product once they get in there. And I think that's, over the last few years, there's really been an emphasis on making sure that the product itself is really world class, so that when we do get people finding out about us, they don't just stop at that point. They stick around.
Yeah, the whole, you have to have your funnel of acquisition, but the retention element is obviously something fundamental. And so that brings us to the topic of the whole fan engagement piece, right? You were saying how on your platform you have a predictor game to keep the people coming back between the actual events, right? Which is always very core to organizations. But you had an element of fan participation back in the days that you actually removed. I would love to know a little bit more about it, what it was, why the decision was made to actually remove it, because it was an innovative move back then. It would still kind of be an innovative move today, because not that many organizations are actually putting fan participation at the center of their thoughts of how to organize the sport. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so it was a product called Fan Boost, and it was implemented right from the start of Formula E, and just removed very recently. The concept behind it was that as a fan, you could vote for your favorite driver, and the top 5 drivers who received the most votes in the run up to a race would receive a power boost at some point during the race, which, as you say, was incredibly innovative, pretty disruptive for a sport to allow a fan to have a direct consequence about what was happening on the pitch, or in our case on track. And probably people listening to this, and if people are thinking about it for the first time, there'll probably be about 50% of people being like, "That's awesome! I love it! Like, what a great idea!" And the other half thinking, "That's not sport. What on earth are they thinking? That's ridiculous." And it really did have that Marmite effect. And for us, in one sense, particularly early on, that was a real pro, because it was something that was newsworthy, that would allow us to break into news outlets that we might not otherwise be able to reach, and for people to hear a bit about Formula E and instantly to understand that this is a sport that was doing things in an innovative way that was a bit different to its competitors.
Yep.
The other side to it is that, it gave us great digital fan engagement. As you mentioned, it had fans coming back to vote. We had tens of thousands of people voting each race, which was a really valuable exercise for us in gathering first-party data, as you mentioned. The cons to it, and parts of the reasons why we removed it in the end, I mentioned earlier that, the first thing is that for all the people that did like it a lot, there are a lot of people that didn't. And there are a lot of people who would find out about Formula E and find out about Fan Boost and think, okay, that's not for me, because it's not a sport that's taking itself seriously, which, is not fair, but, you can understand why people would think that. And as I mentioned as well, over the last few years, there's been a real focus on making sure that the sporting product has a huge amount of credibility and legitimacy in motorsports world. And we really wanted to make the sport speak for itself and the quality of racing that we have speak for itself. And Fan Boost, I think, ended up being a bit of a distraction to that. The other two things I think that have changed since we launched it, which made it was no longer quite as relevant for us, is that we launched in season 5 something called Attack Mode, which is again a really innovative piece of element to our sport, which has all of the cars drive offline into an Attack Mode activation area where they unlock some increased power for a set number of minutes. And that is, right out of the gaming copybook. It's really innovative. It looks great on TV. And it creates a power differential between the cars, which results in more overtaking, which, is ticking a lot of boxes.
Just one question: what's the reasoning? Every driver has it, or how do you define which driver benefits from it?
Yeah, so every driver has it, which means that it's a bit fairer than Fan Boost, which could be seen potentially as being a popularity contest and therefore unfair. So yeah, all of the drivers have the same access to it. And what we found is that when we had Attack Mode and Fan Boost, the product was starting to get a bit cluttered and a little bit hard to understand, because there were these various boosts going on. Whereas, if we had just Attack Mode, that would be something that we could focus on a bit more, explain a bit better, explain the strategy behind it, and be kind of less distracted by the number of elements on there. And the second thing as well is that, we're no longer reliant on Fan Boost as the primary source of our digital engagement with fans. As I mentioned, we've grown our digital platforms. We've grown the content we create on third-party social platforms. And so fans are coming to us anyway and hearing about us anyway. And we don't necessarily need to have that kind of gamified feature as being the sole reason for people to come to us during a race weekend.
Yeah, ultimately the gamification element works well in your digital engagement, but the gamification element to influence the sports was what was perceived as counterproductive.
Exactly. And it's probably just to dwell on the sport for a little bit. I mean, we're averaging well over 100 overtakes per race at the moment in a 45-minute race. So there's a lot going on. I think in Berlin, over the 2 races, we had 190 overtakes. Or maybe that was even just in one race. Sorry, in one race, we had 190 overtakes with 8 different leaders. So there's a huge amount going on. So, I think it was really the decision taken to say, this isn't something we need anymore. The racing is really high quality. There's a lot to cover as it is. We don't need to add in additional elements that might confuse the overall narrative.
Yeah, got you. Opening it up to the wider topics, it's funny because one of the elements you mentioned was the history, the element of history, of tradition of sports versus those innovative sports, and the fact that you were saying that some people were coming to your sport and saying, oh, there's a fan boost, it's not a serious sport. What are your thoughts in terms of how do you actually create a product that's adapted to the new generations without actually hurting the older generations. We're starting to enter the older generation, I would say. But how do you find the right balance between what the older audiences want in terms of what sport typically represents to them, and the younger generations?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. We're very lucky being a young sport that's known for being innovative, that we can probably take more risks than the more established sports. In fact, that's what our fans and it's what our teams, it's what our sponsors expect from us, that we are going to be pushing the boundaries of what is relevant to the sporting fan, and focusing on what's relevant to the younger fan today. So I think at Formula E we're quite privileged to be able to really kind of push the boundaries a bit there. That said, it's always a balance. We find at the moment we're changing a lot each season, and so there's a lot for even our most engaged fans to keep track of, and so we're really thinking very carefully about what we can, the value in keeping some consistency across seasons as well. Last year we changed the qualifying format, which was a huge success. We switched to a knockout style format, which has racers going up head to head in one-to-one duels, and that was amazing. And it's been great it's really, I think, the privilege of being a young sport that you can make one change to a format, which, people aren't necessarily wedded to the old one. People understand there's going to be some change. Year on year, that increased the audience by 50% in the qualifying format, because it was, work was so much better, and people, really embrace that.
Yeah.
For every one of them, it's possible that we might make a change that might not work so well, and we just need to be really clear with our business intelligence team, with talking to our teams and partners, the ecosystem, what's working, what's not, what can we keep the same, what needs to change, and just be really structured and rigorous in how we go about each of those steps, alongside the FIA, of course, who have a key role in implementing the sporting product.
Yeah, it sounds like there's not one right answer, right? But how do you trigger the interest of the people? Yeah, just by having some consistency from one year to the other. It's an interesting one, because the way Formula One worked and attracted the new audience, I would say. So obviously there's everything they did on long format content on certain very well-known platforms. Mm-hmm. There's also the format of the competition that changed and attracted a lot of new fans. I don't know it well enough to know if some of the old fans actually disappeared. But it's an interesting one, not to strike the right balance between wanting to make sure that you don't overwhelm people, yet they probably want some change without even knowing it.
Definitely. People, I think, always overestimate the reaction they're going to have when there's a change in something that they like or love, and they most of the time will probably not see the value in a change, and then like it more or not dislike it as much as they think they're going to. Yeah. That said, I'm probably one of those people now. I'm when it comes to my sporting products that I watch as a fan, I'm someone that really values consistency and history and legacy and all these things, and having, if someone starts playing around with the sport that I really like, that frustrates me as much as the next person. So, I class myself as a bit of a sporting traditionalist in that sense. So, it's always a really interesting balance in my kind of personal approach to sport versus, what our fans and what Formula E is expected to be, which is super innovative. So, it's a really interesting balance, and one that is, as you say, there's no right answer, and there's always pros and cons to each of these decisions you have to make.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in the same phase of my life where I feel like I'm getting at the age where you get romantic about certain things and not business focused. So it was a fun topic to bring up. Already time to start wrapping it up. One thing we always like, Harry, is have our guests suggest books, series, reads, influential people that they might follow and that they would like to recommend to us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, a couple of things spring to mind. First is maybe not so relevant to this audience, but who knows? There's my favorite book in the world is this book called A Little Life, which is this incredibly crushing, heavily depressing book, but has incredible emotional depth. And I just went to see that on the stage in London. There's the theatrical version of it, which was done incredibly well, and it touches on some very heavy topics, including abuse and suicide and all sorts. So not for everyone, maybe, but if you're that way inclined, you're interested in an incredible, powerful read or watching a play, then I really recommend that. Maybe something a little bit lighter, which is actually hard not to be. I just finished watching Welcome to Wrexham, and I know I'm a bit behind on that, so probably a lot of people have watched it already. But if you haven't, it's really fun. It's a very different take on and different style of sports documentary that's really fun. I watched it with my partner, and we both really loved it. And we're interested to see season 2 now, obviously with their recent success.
Yeah, Wrexham is quite a trend right now. But to be honest, and they were also at a conference very recently. They're doing everything right in terms of how to address the market, what type of content to create, show that you can create excitement against lower divisions, etc. So definitely one I would double down on.
Yeah, I want not to like them, but it's almost impossible. They're doing a really great job.
They set it up right. They score. The goalkeeper makes a penalty save at the last minute for the final accession to the next level.
Yeah,
and it's just too good to be true.
It's almost too good. Yeah.
Harry, thanks a lot. Super interesting. I personally really loved it because it's very much the topics that feel close to where I think the industry is going, the excitement of a startup, the challenges of creating a league. So thanks a lot for all your insights. I think it was a great one.
No, I really enjoyed the chat. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoy it as much as we love creating them. If you like the episode, feel free to comment, rate, and share with people around you. You can visit our website, www.lastsource.io, to learn more about our activities. You will discover a wide range of articles and can subscribe to our newsletter to receive the latest tech and sports news in your mailbox every month. Stay tuned for new episodes.
Le corner.